Hello, good people. Hello, good people out on the YouTubes. It is your boy, Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of the buckets, and we are live. We are live. I decided to do a live stream extravaganza. Hold on, let me try to get situated in this frame correctly. Live stream extravaganza for all of my new subscribers. I'm about. I don't think I've done a live stream in about. I think it's maybe 2,000 subscribers ago since I've done a live stream. So I definitely wanted to get on a live stream, give you guys a chance to know who I am, interact with me personally, and yeah, I'm really excited. I'm actually very excited to stream live with you guys and interact. Now, I have to say, my first few months of really going hard at this YouTube thing, it's been a lot of ups and downs. It's been a lot of very encouraging things. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from you guys, but there's been some things that have been a little bit rocky. YouTube, I feel like is it's like a shell game, and with the sort of content that I feel like can get through to you guys, and what kind of content doesn't get through, because at the end of the day, if YouTube doesn't show you my video, you don't see it. So I just want to say, for everyone who is a subscriber, hey, listen, you got to hit that notification bell. It's just no guarantee that when I put up a video that YouTube is going to push it to your feed, right? So I appreciate the subscribing, but if you want to watch the content, it's really important that you get those notifications. What up, Will? The big homie Will Addison in the building. My guy. Me and Will go way back. This dude right here is as solid as an oak tree. Him and his wife Miki, beautiful people. They love God, and I've been blessed and encouraged. And by the way, Will probably, if you're still on, Will, if you don't know this, I used to always say this back in the day. I secretly always wanted you guys' job. You guys were doing the thing at American Family. You were kind of broadcasting every day. So hey, I'm. This is the next best thing. I know you guys are doing your channel as well, so I appreciate you guys. Well, listen, if you guys are not familiar with my content, I just want to make sure that you know what you're going to get when you tune in and Todd Thinks, right? Who am I? Some of you, my guess is that I would say that probably 70, 80, maybe even 90%. I don't know. There's basically 3 videos that I've done that's basically responsible for my entire almost 6,000 people subscribership. Now, I'm not quite, I say the topic here is 6,000 subs. I'm not quite at 6,000 subs. I got like 20 to go. I'm like 5,980 or something like that. But hey, we are rounding up today. But probably most of you came to my channel based on some of the content that I did on The Sound of Freedom, right? That was a big chunk of my subscribership. Many of you came to my content from the video that I did on Jason Aldean and how they were, people in the mainstream media were trying to say that the video was racist, which is their favorite. Oh, thank you, Will. Appreciate that. So people always try to say it was racist, right? That's their favorite accusation. I did that. Of course, the video was not racist. So many of you came from that. And then probably as of late, the biggest one that you came was from my Teslin Figaro Breakfast Club video, demonstrating that the kind of the angry black woman is kind of the favorite attack dog of the modern left. And for a lot of you people, that resonated with you, because you recognize that that's kind of garbage, right? So at any rate, that's how most of you come to my content, but many of you also came to my content for some of my political content, right? I talk about the upcoming presidential election, presidential candidates that I like. Have been not been shy about the fact that I really like Vivek Ramaswamy. Interesting. Let me know if you guys want to hear more content about Vivek. A lot of people, for Christians, Vivek is a bit of a conundrum because he is a Hindu. That is a stumbling block and a hindrance for many people. I understand that perfectly. For me, It is not a preferable worldview for him to have, or a position or religious view for him to have, but I can see some of the other positive attributes that kind of make up for that, which I feel is not preferable. But anyway, let me know if you want me to do more content there. So my stuff about Vivek, obviously I talk a lot about Donald Trump. I talk a lot about just Christian conservative content, a biblical perspective. So that's basically what I am. You see me, I do my intro every time I start a video. I'm Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. Yes, I am a social commentator and a data scientist. So I actually do that for a living. That is my full-time job. No, YouTube does not pay the bills, at least not yet anyway, and probably maybe never if the YouTube overlords have their way, because I got to say, it seems like they have their thumb on the scale with a lot of my content. But anyway, that's who I am. If you know other kind of black conservative voices, right? I just want to say, I like all these guys. I like, I like a little bit of Brandon Tatum stuff. I like a little bit of the guy. His channel is Black Conservative Perspective. I think his actual name is Greg. There are some prominent black conservatives on YouTube that I really like. Good friend of mine, obviously Will and his wife. They're actually doing the YouTube thing, so I recommend their content. Will Addison, Meek Addison, love their content. Also, April. I'm sorry. Why am I drawing a blank on April's last name? I feel terrible because now I've said her name and I can't remember. I've said her first name. I can't remember her last name. That probably is a bad look. But anyway, there are lots of good Christian conservative content out there. My man Jason from Dear Woke Christian. So you'll get a lot of that content. But I want to tell you what's different about me. What's different about me is that I like to cover certain political and cultural issues, but I don't feel like I will make a video on something unless I have something unique to say. The reason why I named my channel Todd Thinks is because that's kind of something that I want to pride myself on, and helping people learn how to think about things, right? How to think about issues. April Chapman, thanks, Will. So terrible, I couldn't remember that. Yes, April Chapman, good content. So I like to talk about things. You might see a video that I do where a lot of people have covered it, right? But if I cover it, it's going to be based on something that is unique. I'm going to have a unique perspective. And I really I don't know if pride myself is the right word to use or the right term to use, but it's really important to me to think deeply about the issue, to understand how to think about things, to not succumb to logical fallacies or emotional thinking. And emotional thinking is an oxymoron, to be quite frank. Emoting is not thinking at all. But yeah, just a fresh perspective. And so I differentiate myself in those perspectives. But I am going to touch on broad issues of culture. And today we're actually going to do a couple things, right? I've got a few topics that I want to cover. Evelyn says, I'm a recent new subscriber and you are unique. That's why I'm subscribed. Thank you so much, Evelyn. I really appreciate that feedback. And I got to say, I really, really do. First of all, if you ever comment on one of my videos, even if I don't respond, I almost always read them, right? So what you guys say is really important to me. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that not everybody is in lockstep with what I say. If I say something and you disagree, I'm happy to have those conversations. Unless, of course, you say something stupid. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Don't take me too seriously here. I was trying to give myself a little womp, 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 but I don't have my, yeah. So a little clown music for myself. So yes, Evelyn, I appreciate the feedback there. So today in this live stream, so I just want to give you guys who I am, what this channel is about. It is Christian conservative content, social commentary. That's what I'm about. If the Bible makes you mad, I really apologize for that, but you're going to hear me talk about it a lot. You're going to hear me talking about God a lot. And so I got three things I want to talk about today that really kind of a little sampler. You ever go to like a like a restaurant, and they got a bunch of stuff on the menu, and you can't decide what you want, and then they got this like sampler platter where you say, hey, it's a sampler platter. It's just a little bit of everything that we serve, just so you get an idea of what to expect and what our kind of culinary tastes are. That's what I got for you today on this live stream, right? So we're gonna cover a few topics here. The first thing we're gonna talk about is this idea of the black community. I am of the opinion that there is no black community, and I know it's kind of spicy. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about why. So there's no black community. Second thing we're going to talk about is when something can mean anything, it doesn't mean anything at all, right? And this is a concept that I have that I've thought about with respect to marriage. This is something, a concrete example of that is how people want to make marriage just whatever they think it is, and they want to come up with their own definitions of it. And if marriage can be whatever you think it is, then that means it isn't anything at all. I'm going to explain that logic. And then finally, I want to talk about the Jesus style of answering critics, and answering questions, right? Because I think when I watch presidential candidates, particularly conservative presidential candidates or politicians in general, when they get questioned by mainstream left-wing media, the questions they're often asked are pejorative and kind of loaded with emotional language that kind of, it's kind of a question-begging epithet, right? Where such that, it's almost like, have you stopped beating your wife yet? That sort of question. And Jesus didn't answer dishonest questions like that. As a matter of fact, there was a very specific way he responded to those questions. And I wanted to kind of go through that, because I think not only would that help, I think these political candidates should hire me as kind of like a media coach, even though I've never done any mainstream media at any length. I think I can help them just by taking the Bible, because, how many of you know that, God is pretty good at answering questions. So Jesus answered questions whenever he was asked a dishonest question. He answered it in a way that was that let them know that the question was dishonest. It got to the root of the question. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and using a Ron DeSantis interview. So another commenter says, I agree there is no black community, but that can be said about most communities. Media likes to talk up. Exactly right. You are spot on. And so let's just dive back into that. Let's dive right into that. There is no black community. Let's just talk about why there. First of all, that hasn't always been true. Okay, the fact that there was a black community was certainly the case, and it was certainly necessary. But the fact that we had a so-called black community was really artificially generated by the racialized society that we lived in, right? The black community was a necessity, right? Because we were literally kept out of white spaces, right? And so if you were a black person, you went into white spaces, you would literally be ostracized and sometimes even have violence committed against you, and sometimes even killed, right? So this was a horrible time in our nation's history. So this was bad. So the black community existed by default. Why? Because black people had to live in and amongst each other's presence, because we were essentially shoved into one artificial group. And I say artificial group because obviously when you have an arbitrary characteristic like skin color, that is not necessarily the best way to group people, right? Because the strongest glue to kind of bring people together is on the basis of ideology. And the church itself is actually the best example of that, because the church has a common creed that unites us. That's what it's supposed to, at least. It's supposed to unite us. We don't always listen to it, so it doesn't always have that effect. But another comment here, it says, the only communities I've ever felt a part of was small towns and church. Both seem to be dying. Very well said. Very well said. Well, I'm glad at least you felt a part of community in church, right? Because we should be a part of community in church. But let's just think about this term community, right? And the term community is actually a mashup of two words, and that is common unity, right? The common unities, right? So when you have a community, that means there's something that is common, right? And you're unified around that thing, community, common unity. There again, in times past, when racism, Jim Crow, segregation, all those things prevailed, the common unity was the fact that we were treated differently in American society. So that was the thing we were unified around. That was the common thing. But of course, you would say, the people who spent all their times in the bars and gambling all night were very different from black people who were a part of the church, for example, right? Or professional people who went to college. Maybe there were different people who had different worldviews, different values, right? So the idea of the black community was always artificial, right? Well, when those artificial barriers got torn down when our laws changed, Civil Rights Act, it became illegal to discriminate, all of these things. Then we became free to pursue unity with people with whom we found common values, right? Regardless of their skin color, regardless of their ethnicity. And what happened, obviously, is a lot of things happened, right? Interracial marriages started to pick up. We started to have social bonds that went beyond, obviously, this artificial barrier that was placed around us in the black community. And so when I think about, here's the thing that's interesting about it. Interestingly enough, I did a little short video. For those of you who don't know, I call myself a semi-retired artist, right? I still rap and produce a little bit, but only in very specific instances. And so I did a little YouTube short called, I don't want to say the name of it because I think that's the reason why it kind of got demoted, and they said that YouTube said it was kind of too spicy. Basically, it's the use of a common epithet, right? It's a raccoon, but take the rack off, right? You understand what I'm saying? This is a kind of a charge often made towards black people who are not down with the cause, right? Who do not mindlessly echo like left-wing talking points, essentially, right? They say, if you don't have left-wing political ideas, then you are a raccoon, right? Minus the rack. You understand what I'm saying? And this is the problem with this is that the way now that quote unquote being black is being defined is by your political affiliations. This has been, and I'm going to do a video on this sometime in the future, but there's a guy by the name of Manning Johnson. He was actually a contemporary of Martin Luther King Jr. And Manning Johnson was literally recruited into the Communist Party of the United States, and they basically infiltrated the black church. He was a Christian, this guy, Manning Johnson. And he explained how this was the kind of this strategy of the Communist Party was to use the racial tension as a means to basically control black people. And so obviously the Communist Party was I don't need to explain the evils of communism probably to many people in my audience, but like that was the idea. They said, if you're going to be a part of the quote unquote black community, you have to espouse these political ideas, right? So the point being is that this is obviously a false narrative. This is obviously a false standard of supposedly what it means to be black, right? And so I want to read a little bit something. I want to read an article that kind of shows, because when things started to actually diverge, right? When things started to, when those artificial barriers were removed, right? And we had that kind of common unity of being discriminated against, then it became like, okay, well, which political ideologies are going to actually help black people make progress, right? And so on the left, there was all of this talk about supposedly how, all of these left-wing policies were going to essentially, usher in the promised land for black people. And then after a while, there were many people that believed that stuff. And then after a while, people started to get wise to the fact that this wasn't happening. And so this is an example of why the divergence in the black community continues to happen. So How Liberal Policies Have Killed Black Communities by Clarence Thomas. And this is some excerpts from a book here. So I'm going to read a little bit of this to give you a flavor. Michael Pack says about talking to Clarence Thomas, you've talked a little today. Here, I'm starting here. You have talked a little today about how life in the Black community has not been improved by many well-intentioned social programs. Do you think, in some sense, it is worse than when you grew up? Clarence Thomas says, it's a disaster. When I grew up, you had family. You didn't have drugs. You didn't have gangbanging. You could walk down the street. Okay, let me just pause here. This is true. Okay, let's just say what it is. This is true. There has been a market decline as our opportunities have increased, right? As the racial barriers to success have been removed, the social barriers to success have been erected in the Black community in the sense that the Black community and the Black family has been disintegrating. And many have attributed this to some of the social programs, how they created the false incentives, most notably how the kind of the welfare state, welfare programs incentivized Black fathers not to be in the home. They said, hey, we'll give you money if you're not married. And so many Black fathers kind of stayed away. And then that became kind of the stigma of not being with your family kind of went away. And that created a downward spiral. I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think that's undoubtedly true. And so Clarence Thomas is putting his finger on that. He says here, there was a change in our society. I think that these programs certainly had an impact. Just go back to the savannah and look around you. Our worst fears were realized. We didn't want to be right. We wanted to be wrong. It wasn't about winning an argument. No, we wanted to lose the argument. We didn't want the damage to occur. That's why we were involved. I don't particularly like public life. I never wanted to be in public life. I'd like to go to football games. I'd like not to make decisions about other people's lives. But what drags you into it is when you see these principles being undermined, which leads us to destruction. These policies destroy people. And ultimately, I think we're going to destroy the very thing that allows us to have liberty and have a free society. All right. So he mentions that. I think this is worth repeating. And I think that it is objectively true that Black people still supporting these left-wing policies. I think the only way you can do that is if you are just completely brainwashed, in my opinion. I know that sounds harsh, but can anybody explain to me how we're better off transing our kids? Can anybody explain to me why we're better off, with all of these kind of social programs where people don't learn to be independent? Can anybody tell me one single policy that they can enact that would have a better and more significant impact than just people getting married and not having kids before they get married, right? So I got a couple comments here. TNT Cyclopedia says, Clarence Thomas is a national treasure. Absolutely. The biography on him is amazing. I suggest everyone watch it. Yes, I think that excerpt that I just read was from that. Evelyn says, well, the book / memoir is what I'm reading. Excellent. Yep. So yes. So I encourage everyone. Great content from Clarence Thomas. But what Clarence Thomas is putting his finger on is that right now, although it was maybe the case, maybe back in the day when we thought some of these programs would help us, it is objectively true that they have not. Okay. And this is why we got all this. We still have these people still saying, hey, there must be still racism because, Black people haven't caught up to white people. Well, there's a lot of false assumptions in that. But the bottom line is that there are people who are still keeping this idea that racism is alive because we don't have the equality, when the fact is that these policies were never going to produce those results anyway. So it's really kind of a weird kind of self-perpetuating society. And there are those of us in the Black community who have the nerve to notice that these things don't work and have abandoned the Democrat Party. And particularly those of us who are in the church, we have said, why in the world are we going to sit there and support a political party who wants to pervert, sexually, groom our children, who want to pervert every principle that we read in the Bible about who God is, who the human being is, who the family is. They don't have care for children in the womb. Why are we going to support that? And then you still got these people out here talking about, well, if you, to quote Joe Biden, if you're not voting Democrat, you ain't black. This is why there's no black community. There's no black community because there is no principle of so-called blackness that unites us. What keeps a community together are principles and values, not skin color. So there is no black community. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know in the comments. All right. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And I know that none of you probably watched this stupid show, and you probably shouldn't. It's a it's a program called the Whatever Podcast, okay? And basically, it's kind of interesting because this guy, his name's Brian. That's this guy here on the left here. He basically has these. I mean, I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. He basically has these hoes. I mean, that's what they are. Basically, these women, these modern women. And I don't want to judge, because I know a lot of these women come up in families and in situations where they're by the grace of God, there go I, right? But basically, they have these fascinating conversations with these women. I think in a lot of ways, Brian is kind of using these women in a little bit of an exploitative way, but we do get a fascinating view into the minds of these women. And Candace Owens, I know everyone's favorite, every leftist black person's favorite target, right? Candace Owens was on their Whatever podcast. I know she was probably uncomfortable and cringing the whole time, but she's talking to these women, and I want to just have us look at this conversation that she has with these women about marriage. I think she does an okay job explaining this, but I think it's worth kind of viewing how these modern women view marriage, how they understand it, and just gives you an idea of what the uphill battle that we have, because with this understanding of marriage, we are in trouble. Let's listen.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a big deal.
Earlier it was talked about how sleeping or letting your husband or wife sleep with someone else is irresponsible, or it's not a marriage anymore. I'd be kind of curious of what you believe a responsible marriage is like. Or I understand that you have a religious view on marriage, but when I think about a marriage, I think I could see somebody saying they're married if it's completely romantic, you're not allowed to do romance with anyone else. Basically, what does a responsible marriage mean to you?
Marriage is not just a contract. It wasn't just the government came up with a contract for people to get married. The history of marriage, you can't separate that from the church. The problem is people are trying to make things cool and trying to update and make them modern, and now people are saying you can have a polygamous marriage and you can bring in other people on the outside of a marriage. What's the point of getting married? Literally, I'd like to ask the question, if you think that you can, if you want to marry somebody and then outsource the sex, outsource the responsibility, outsource what the labor of love is actually supposed to be about, why not just stay single?
So you wouldn't do a threesome with your husband?
Absolutely not.
Hence, you see why I say this show is kind of a dumpster fire, right? That woman that just said that, she calls herself a sex therapist, and she provides therapy for married people by sleeping with their husbands, which is, hey man, you can't make this stuff up, okay? So she asked a silly question. I just had to pause there, but let's continue.
Because he's my husband.
Did you even have to ask that to get the
Well,
answer?
I mean, there's
Absolutely
married
not.
couples that want to have threesomes, and
you know
some
what
of
happens?
these ladies are bi-curious.
You should jump into those Reddit threads, because every single time that marriage ends in divorce. There's so many Reddit threads
No,
about.
they don't.
And a lot of them
I have
actually do
regulars
really
of
well
over 5
too.
years.
Okay.
And
There's
All right. So here you have these young women arguing that if you sleep with someone outside of your marriage, that might actually help your marriage. Okay. you cannot make this stuff up. Like literally, you can't make it up. I just want to just take a moment here to just comment here because I think there's two things being discussed here. One is they're talking about. Oops, sorry, I am on the. I changed my. I had to go back to look at my chat here. I'm going to get a better setup here in a moment. But there's two things going on here. One, they're trying to define what a marriage is, right? And Candace is saying, without God, there's no marriage. If you're not going to be faithful, then what's the point, right? And this is an important thing that I think is missing with this whole thing. With all of these supposed configurations of marriage, what people are effectively saying is that marriage can be whatever the two people who are involved want it to be. And this is, if you boil that down to what it really means when you say that, is what you're saying is that marriage doesn't mean anything. Whenever we define anything, we define it on the basis of how it is different from other things, right? So if two things are different, but we call it the same thing, then we haven't defined it, right? Do you understand that? In principle, when we call two things that are different the same thing, we have failed to define either thing, right? So, okay, now if you're in a marriage relationship, right, if you're going to call it a marriage, and you sleep with other people, and then you're in a marriage relationship, and you don't sleep with other people, and you're in a marriage relationship where you have, multiple non-committal, other extracurricular relationships in all different configurations, some men, some women, some of you are going to decide that it's going to be, maybe it's going to be completely more like a business. Whatever configuration you're trying to say, if you're saying it can be all of those things, then what you're saying is that it's not any of those things. I don't think we realize that deductively, when you define things arbitrarily, that means that they become meaningless. All right, let's listen further, because now these immoral women are basically going to try to make the case that it's better for your marriage if you let your husband sleep with somebody else, or if you sleep with somebody else outside your marriage.
They're
Some that
not
do really.
divorcing.
Do you believe
Well-
atheists can get married?
I think atheists get married because they want a tax break. I don't see the point in an atheist getting married. Why don't you just live with your partner, okay? Whoever it is that you're dating, you're at the stage you said, I don't know if you live with your boyfriend or whatever it is. Why take the next leap? If you're wearing crosses for fun and, it
I mean,
seems
if
like
you're actually
good.
asking
Yeah,
the question,
yeah.
I mean, because then I would just be pledging the fact that I would want to be with them forever.
But
I don't really.
you can just be with them forever. So what is it
Right,
that you
but-
crave that when you want to get married? What's that next step for you? What does it mean? What's the difference between dating and marriage?
Because it's a commitment.
Is dating not a commitment?
It's a commitment, but it's saying a
But you're
next
in the-
step.
in-
it's
within-
solidifying it.
Okay, solidifying what? Because if
Solidifying
you're,
a bond between two people that love each other.
Okay, but what is solidified? If you can then jump into that next commitment, which is the exact same as dating, and you can sleep with other people, and you can put topless photos on the internet, what are you getting married for? Pictures on Instagrams to say you did it?
I mean, I'm not sleeping with other people.
What's the
but
difference for you between dating and marriage?
I just
Candace is making an excellent point here. I don't think people realize that this is actually an excellent point. We don't realize that marriage is not just between two people, it's between three parties. That's the husband, the wife, and God. Let's really think about it. Marriage is not natural. I'm going to say that again. Marriage is not natural. Marriage is spiritual. The Bible says what God has joined together, let no man separate. When you come together in marriage, God is literally joining you. He's creating a new thing, a new unit out of the two. And I've even said this. I think I said this briefly in a stream that I did with my brother about a month ago. God is a tri-person, right? God is a tri-personal being. We call him the triune God, the Trinity. So that means God is one being, but he has three persons, right? And we as human beings, we are beings, but we are unit beings. We are unit persons, right? So we are one being that consists of one person. It's kind of like a unicycle. A unicycle is a bike with one wheel, and a tricycle is a bike with three wheels. But A unicycle is one bike and a tricycle is one bike. A tricycle is not three bikes. You understand what I'm saying? But then if we are unit people and God is a tri-person, then what's the bi-person? What is an example of the bi-person? The singular being that it consists of two persons. That is the marriage relationship. And then the marriage relationship, because it has the capacity to produce children, then you have the husband, the wife, and the child, and the three persons create a triunity, which we call a family. Or I should say more specifically, the three categories of persons that make up the family, because there's the mother, the father, and the child, right? And you can have multiple children. So the family unit is a picture of the triune nature of God. And so when you talk about marriage, you can't talk about marriage without talking about God, because it is not natural, it is spiritual. And I think people fail to realize that. Let's see here. Glad I found your channel. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad that you found my channel as well, TNT Cycles. All right, let's read some. All right, so I got a gentleman that said, Dr. Oog said, I've been on the Vivek train for months now, most promising candidate in a long time. Well, we'll get back to that. I do like Vivek a lot. So I'm going to be talking more about him. I've got Peter in here. I'm just going to read a couple comments before I continue to go. Peter says, I like your take on how the woke left media uses Kamala Harris and the other black women as criticization shields. 100%. That's what they do. That's who they are. So appreciate the comment there, Peter. Let me just say this here. So I'll come back to some more comments here in a moment. But I think it's important to recognize here this issue with marriage, right? Candace is, she doesn't articulate it as thoroughly. She's on the spot. She's kind of debating with these people. But I think she takes this lady to task in a way that I think is productive, because what she's saying is 100% correct. When God doesn't define what your relationships are, then the thing has no definition. When everybody can define for themselves what a thing is, then it means it doesn't have any definition. It's the same thing in saying God is the one who determines what is right and what is wrong, what is and what is not true, right? And this is why we get all these weird configurations of marriage. Let's listen further.
Just told you, it's a bond between two people. You're solidifying that by law. You're literally making it known. I want to be with this person forever. It isn't
bond
just a
in what
simple
way?
breakup. Oh, I can go and do whatever the fuck I want and leave.
Nope.
It's a partnership. It's a bond. It's forever.
But there's no difference between dating and marriage,
there is a
other than the
difference.
idea in your head that it's a bond, because you're saying also.
But it's not an
that
idea in
it's
my head.
okay.
It's on paper.
Oh, okay, it's the paper. That was. The
But
point
it's
I was
not a
making.
but I'm
just
saying
a
it's
piece
not
of
a
paper.
tax break. It's a legal
And-
thing.
and I think for people that are
connecting to
committed-
somebody for the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, I think for people that think about marriage and don't think about a cross as something funsy to wear, it's not a piece of paper. It is a union between a man and a woman, a sacred union that should be protected from external forces. Definitely not something that you open up. How I would feel disgusting if my husband ever came to me and said, I want you to sleep with another man or sleep with another woman so that I can fill my sexual fetish. I mean, it's an utter perversion of what it means to be married, and it will lead to divorces. People that have this perspective will, and I'm not saying that if you don't do it, you won't get divorced 100%, but I do want to say that there is probably a reason that a lot of sex workers struggle to find people that want to marry them.
Well,
All right. So you hear Candace's take on that. Spot on, Candace. Air horns for Candace. Round of applause. Well said. Well said. All right. So that's my take on marriage. These ladies obviously don't know what it means. It doesn't mean anything if you just simply are going to say, oh, well, it's just, me and my boyfriend, saying we love each other. It's like, well, can't you and your boyfriend say you love each other without, quote unquote, getting married? I don't know what that means. All right. I got one more segment that I want to do. We're going strong here. This is what I call the Jesus style of answering questions. Now, Ron DeSantis, there are a lot of people who are big fans of Ron DeSantis. I don't mind Ron DeSantis. I tell you what, I'd much rather have Ron DeSantis than Joseph R. Biden. That is for sure. But, right now, Ron's, his campaign is falling a little flat here. But he had this interview with CBS that I thought was instructive. We know that mainstream media is effectively left-leaning, right? And whenever they interview mainstream GOP candidates or people who are on the right, they tend to be they tend to ask questions in a way that I think is dishonest. I think it's a little bit. Many of the questions are loaded, like they are effectively of the type, "Have you stopped beating your wife yet?" Right? That's the classic emotionally loaded language, kind of the question begging epithet. Right? You're assuming in the question what you have not demonstrated to be true. Right? And this little segment here that this interview has with Ron DeSantis, which supposedly the criticism from the NAACP, the National Association for Colored People, which I would like to say for the record was actually started by communist white people. I'm just saying, communist white people started the National Association for Colored People. As a matter of fact, the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Manning Johnson, attested to this fact. Again, he was a contemporary of Martin Luther King Jr., which we won't go into right now. But this whole NAACP nonsense where they say Florida's not safe for black people because, Ron DeSantis is racist. And watch how this interviewer leans into this. And I'm going to give you what I call the Jesus style, what I think Ron DeSantis should have done. I thought he did a good job, so I'm not saying he did a bad job. I'm going to give him a B+ for how he answered it, but he could have got an A+ if he used the Jesus style. So let's listen to what is going on in this interview.
Warning earlier this summer saying that Florida is, quote, openly...
Let me go back a little bit.
The NAACP issued a warning earlier this summer saying that Florida is, quote, openly hostile for African Americans, people of color, and LGBTQ individuals. As president, you would represent the entire country. Can everyone feel welcome in a DeSantis America?
100%. And that is politics. That's a stunt that they're playing. They obviously have very left-wing agenda, which I don't begrudge them that. But in Florida, our unemployment rate amongst African Americans is way lower than New York, California, and these blue states. We have more black-owned businesses in Florida than any state in the United States.
All right, so Ron DeSantis answers this question, I think, in a respectable way, because he takes it away from the so-called narrative of the NAACP, and he goes to the facts, right? Hey, black people are actually flourishing in my state, so NAACP can say what they want, but black people are winning in Florida. And I could say, round of applause on that, okay? But the Jesus style of answering this question would be more effective. So let me explain to you. Let me just bring you in closer. Let me explain to you what the Jesus style is. Oftentimes, people would go to Jesus and they would ask him bogus questions, right? They would ask him loaded questions, and the question wasn't really seeking information. They were trying to make him look bad, right? Or they were trying to present a question that he wouldn't be able to answer so that they could say, see, he's not a prophet. See, he's not who he says he is. He's a fraud. Jesus would pick up on this often, and when he knew he was being asked a dishonest question, and this is the key to the whole thing, when he knew he was being asked a question that was really just designed to make him look bad, he would not answer the question directly, but he would often say, I will answer your question if you can answer mine. One such example is when Jesus was asked a question and he said, you know what? Let's just put a pin in that for a second. Let me ask you a question. John's baptism, was it from heaven or of men? And then the Pharisees kind of reasoned amongst themselves and they said, hey, if we say it's from heaven, then he's going to say, well, why didn't you obey him? And then if we say it's from men, they looked around and they recognized that most of the people thought that John the Baptist was indeed a prophet, so they didn't want to look bad in front of the people. So they said, "Oh, we can't tell. We can't tell if John's baptism, if it was in heaven." He said, "Okay, well then I'm not going to answer your question." That's the Jesus style. The Jesus style is to effectively go on offense whenever you're asked a dumb question. Whenever you're asked a loaded or dishonest question, you go on offense. You don't answer the question. Now, this woman asked a question that to me is bogus on its face. She is saying the mere presentation of the question implies that the state is hostile towards black people, which is bogus. Now, she could try to, now she's going to say it this a little bit later, and you'll see. But I don't want to get too much ahead of it, but she tries to come back to it and try to say, well, some people say. And a better way to ask this question, to deal with this question, would be for Ron DeSantis to just put the question back on her and say, would black people be welcome in our state? Let me ask you a question. Do you have any evidence that they aren't? For example, are black people fleeing our state? Do we have a net inflow of black people into our state or a net outflow of black people? Do you have any indications that black people are suffering financially? Or do they have more crimes? Or do they have other social markers that would indicate that black people are not doing well? What is the basis of your question? Why are you, well, and then she would go, oh, well, I'm just going on what some people say. I said, well, you know what some people also say? Some people also say that, COVID-19 was intentionally created to subdue the nations and send us into the new world order. That's what some people say. Do you believe that? Would you be, if you thought it was a conspiracy theory or something that was illegitimate, would you repeat it just because that's what some people say? You see, going on offense, that would be the Jesus style. But Ron DeSantis, he does okay. He answers the question directly, but he should have answered the question with a question by questioning the very premise of the question, by going on offense. As the saying goes, in politics, if you're explaining, you are losing. Let's continue.
I have more African-American students on scholarships for our school choice program than any other state in the United States. And so we've shown
well
people
said.
can succeed in Florida regardless of their race, ethnicity, any of that. We will judge people as individuals. We want people to rise up based on their merit. But here's the thing.
Because of your policies in Florida, there are minorities, Black Americans, and there are people who are part of the LGBTQ community who think that you would discriminate against them.
Well,
okay, so now she doubles down. And I have to say, I am irked. I am irked by this because this shows that, first of all, she's a left-wing activist. And so she's trying to, once again, saying, well, some people say. Here's the more reasonable question, and this ties back to what I was talking about earlier, that there is no black community. The real division now in our society is not along racial lines, it is along ideological lines. The question that I would ask her is, let me ask you a question, madam. Do you think if you ask conservative black people that question, whether or not they feel safe, what do you think they would say? What do you think conservative, not left-wing black people, conservative black people would say? Because, you see, people on the left think that everything people on the right do is racist. Can you explain to me that how, despite the fact that, for example, and I know he's not going to offer any apologetics for Donald J. Trump, but to take Donald Trump, for example, Donald Trump got 8% of the black vote in 2016. He got 12% of the black vote in 2020, despite 4 years of nonstop Donald Trump's a racist. How do you explain that? How do you explain that? What it says to me is that there are many black people who are independently minded. They think for themselves. They can look at the evidence and the data. And just because you say something is racist doesn't mean it's legitimate. And quite frankly, I think it's dishonest and irresponsible of you to repeat things that you have no factual basis to repeat. Just because somebody in the NAACP says black people don't feel safe, that doesn't mean that they aren't safe, and you have no proof of that. So I'm not going to dignify that question with an answer. That's the Jesus style. Let's listen.
Part of the reason they think that is because of narratives that are put out by media. I mean, for example, when we had the fight with Disney over the elementary education.
I say, first of all, he says part of it is put out by narratives. He's being nice there. The Jesus style would have said, the reason why they think that is because people like you snake, you and your brood of vipers, media people keep lying and saying that crap. But hey, he wants to be the anti-Trump. I get it.
About should you have things about sex and gender identity, telling a second grader that their gender's fluid, we said absolutely not. Parents in Florida agreed, and throughout the country, I think, agreed with that. That was termed by the media as don't say gay. The bill did not mention the word gay. I never said that gay people wanted kindergartners to be told they can change their gender. That was the media that created that and the left that created that. There were a lot of gay people in Florida that felt that was unfair to them because they didn't think it was appropriate to have that kind of...
So when is the right age to talk about gender identity?
Well, I think...
Let me bring it in close here. There again, this woman demonstrating the fact that she's a left-wing activist and not a journalist. When is the right age? This is the wrong question. Again, I hate that Ron DeSantis didn't go back at her, didn't understand the Jesus style. The question that I would have asked her is, it's not don't tell me when the right age is. Tell me who are the right people. Who are the right people to talk to kids about gender identity? Let me ask you a question, Miss Reporter, who's effectively a social activist for the left wing. Let me ask you a question. Whatever your ideas are about gender, how would you like it if you sent your kid to school and then I taught them not your values but mine? Because I can tell you that in my house we don't do the transgender affirming stuff in our house. We believe that God makes everyone exactly in the body that they should be in, that if you think that you're in the wrong body, if you think your mind is different from your body, it's not your body that needs to change, it's your mind. That's what I teach my kids in my house. Would you like me to teach that to your kids when they come to school? That's the question I would have asked her. That's the Jesus style. That's going on offense. Can I teach your kids about my values with respect to this issue? Of course she would say no. Then you say, okay, then you can't teach mine your values. It's not what age, it's who and in what context should we be talking about these things. And in school, it's not the appropriate context. You teach your kids at home your ideas about sex and sexuality, and I'll teach my kids at home, and when they come to school, they'll learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. Let's see what Ron DeSantis says. I think he does a pretty good job here, though.
The idea that a teacher would say, yes, you can change, and there's some schools around the country where they say it's okay to transition a kid without the parent's consent or knowledge, and as a parent, that is just unacceptable. I mean, schools serve an important function, but to be intruding into a family matter like that, I think goes beyond what is appropriate. And here's the thing. Are we doing so well as a country on math scores and reading scores and science? Why don't we focus on those things? That I think unites everybody regardless of their viewpoint. And I'm not saying be negative about, the gender identity stuff. I'm just saying I don't think it's appropriate to have in there at all. So I think we did the right thing on that. And I think most people of all different persuasions agree with the stand we took. But I think it's also important to say, I've got people moving into Florida in record numbers. We are the #1 fastest growing state, and we are the state with the most net domestic in-migration. And that's people from all walks of life that are coming, and they're coming because the state is successful and they have an opportunity to get ahead.
I think that's well said. I got to give Ron DeSantis a little round of applause on that, because I thought that was an appropriate answer. But in general, we have to know who these people are. These people are not journalists, they're activists. And before I go here, I want to just read a couple more comments. Peter says sharp. Well, I think I probably missed the context of that comment, but in any case, let's see. Ron's a great governor when he's there, but I want Trump to clean house, and I hope he takes Vivek as VP to give him experience so he doesn't have to make the same mistakes Trump made in the first term. I agree with that. And I would also like to say, TNT Cycles, that even in this conversation here that that Ron DeSantis was having with this reporter, I think this is the difference between Vivek and this reporter, because I think Vivek Ramaswamy is a better communicator and expositor of values than Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, I think like I said, he did a serviceable job. I don't think he did bad in this in this interview, and he came back to the facts. It's like, look, you can say what you want to say, but we got people coming into our state to record numbers, and that's from all walks of life. That's black people. That's whatever other group of people you want to name. But I think that when it came to talking about the why behind the transgenderism, and I think Vivek is a little bit more, emphatic about the fact that, hey, listen, this is a condition of suffering. When someone has transgenderism, we don't want to increase that suffering. We want to help these people get relief. And we don't want to encourage them to continue to go down that path of gender dysmorphia. And so Ron DeSantis, I think, kind of took a soft view of that. He kind of took hey, we don't want to, be too, explicit about the fact that, gender dysmorphia is a mental illness, unfortunately. But we just want to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic. That gets you kind of past things for the time being. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to change people's minds about these ideas, and that's where Vivek shines. TNT Cycles. That's why I like your idea. I think Trump will be a good person to hopefully clean up the swamp. Hopefully he'll actually do it. He said he was going to do it last time. He didn't actually do it, right? But I hope he actually does it this time. And I think Vivek, if he would. Vivek keeps saying, hey, I can't be number two. I can't be number two. He needs to humble himself. He is a young guy. Vivek, I think, is kind of the prototype for what we need in the GOP from a conservative standpoint. He's got a lot of desirable attributes. And so, but more specifically, someone who is an expositor of values, right? Of things that we believe, not just talking about legislation and how we're winning and how the economy is doing great. Ron DeSantis did that, but we need someone who can say, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and not give political answers that are evading the question. We have to look to people who want to promote evil in the eye and say, you are wrong. It is wrong to teach gender ideology in our schools. It is wrong to increase the volume and the frequency of gender dysmorphia. It is wrong for us to use COVID-19 as kind of a weapon against the people. It's wrong to have radical environmentalism controlling our policies. It's wrong. It's not just bad, it's wrong. It's a hoax, as Vivek likes to say. And so I appreciate people who have that sort of boldness. All right. Well, those are the three topics that I wanted to tackle here. We are just over an hour with our live stream, and I think that wraps things up. So for those of you who are new, hopefully you appreciate this content. I think we are on a path to become a strong community. And I really appreciate the fact that you guys are here. You guys are going to get to say, I was here first. I just want to touch early subscribers, prayerfully, by the time we get to the election of 2024. So let's say November of next year. So about a year from now. I got lofty goals, y'all. I got lofty goals. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. I don't know if I can get there, but I'll tell you what, if you guys would be active and promoters of this content, I know we can get there. We'll all go up together. And some of you will get to say, hey, all the rest of you new people, you're bandwagon people. I was Todd day one. I've been here from the jump. so the rest of y'all can kick rocks. All right. All right, friends. I appreciate you. Todd Thinks is signing out. Let me know in the comments or anywhere else what content you want to see. I've got a series that I'm working on. It's called Why Democrats Are Wrong About Everything. I've got 2 episodes out. I've got 2 more to go. I will try to get those out as soon as I can. But I really appreciate everyone tuning in. And we're going to sign off this evening. Till next time, friends. God bless you, and thanks for tuning in.